All right, well, I see it is 10:01. Debbie, I'm ready to go. Again, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this morning or afternoon, again, wherever you're joining us for Tech Canada's Deeper Insights webinar series. My name is Katrinelle Popescu. I'm Tech Canada's Marketing and Communications Manager, and it is my pleasure to host the special edition of our series. It's a three-part series, and we'll be strategically focused. Debbie will be strategically focused on unleashing your leadership potential. And we couldn't be more excited about having Debbie as our featured speaker. Debbie Pearmain has over 25 years of experience working with CEOs and leadership teams. She's a renowned human resources consultant and a leadership coach, as well as a highly sought after speaker and trainer. Debbie's impressive credentials, and Debbie, I'm going to just highlight a few, but of course, if there's anything that I missed that you think is really pertinent for this presentation, please do add them after. Her credentials include being recognized as an Instructor Excellence Award winner and a Level 2 Certified Master Facilitator. Additionally, she's been certified in MHS systems, EQI 2.0, and EQI 360 assessment tools, as well as the HRG Hardiness Resilience Gauge and DISC personality profiles. I'm sure many individuals have taken something either like DISC or similar to it throughout their leadership career. We're really honored to have Debbie Pearmain with us for this series, and I know we're all eager to learn from your wisdom and expertise, Debbie. In this first session, and I'm sure you'll address it, Debbie, but it's a three-part kind of series. We'll be stopping after each section. If you have any questions or comments, Debbie, of course, will address those. But with this first session, we'll be focusing on positive intelligence, an essential leadership skill, of course, that's going to help all of us unlock our full potential. So I don't want to delay it any further. I'm going to throw it over to you, Debbie. Thank you again. It's going to be a wonderful webinar, and look forward to hearing from you.
Great. Thank you so much. And I just want to give a warm welcome to everyone who's joining us today. Thank you for coming, and thank you for making time and space in the busyness of your day, of your life, to attend this webinar. My sincere hope is that you leave with a couple of actions that you can commit to implementing after today's session that will have a positive impact on your life. And today is a really important topic for all of us. As was mentioned, we discussed doing a three-part series, and I just want to give you a bit of context to why we arrived at that conclusion. As mentioned, I've worked in HR for over 25 years, and for 18 of those years, I've worked for some of the top leadership development organizations in the world. And I've taught and trained, I don't know, probably 1,000 or so leaders over my time on many different leadership skills, many different iterations of all kinds of leadership skills. And I can tell you that in the last 3 years, the topics and the content of what we're teaching and training leaders today is drastically different from what we taught and trained leaders on 10 years ago. Of course, we all know why, because we are living in a very different world. The world we live in today is volatile, it's uncertain. The pace and rate of change is like never before. And so we are needing very different skills in order for us to be able to lead and manage well. I want to help people go from not just surviving or languishing, but to a place of flourishing. So positive intelligence is groundbreaking, and we're so lucky that we have such great advances in things like neuroscience and brain science. And you can blurry see this book up here, but it's based on the book called Positive Intelligence by Shirzad Charmain. And I'm just going to tell you that 3 years ago, I had the absolute pleasure of being a part of a 6-week program that was out on the topic of positive intelligence. And the timing of that could not have been more, I'm going to say, beneficial, just because of everything that we were all going through back then. And I was in a position of needing to show up and support leaders. I'm also an ICF certified coach, so I coach leaders daily. And most of the people I was coaching were really coming to me with stress and worry and anxiety and burnout and emotional exhaustion and needing and looking for more tools. As you can see up here, why positive intelligence? This is based on groundbreaking research in neuroscience, organizational science and psychology, and cognitive behavior therapy. We are human beings. And so we look to all these different sciences and their research to help us find ways to be able to flourish and thrive in this new world that we live in today. So what you see up here is a bit of a roadmap. And when chatting about this leadership series, I was saying that most clients come to me at the behavioral level. They're wanting to manage stress. They're wanting to handle their anxiety better. They're wanting to have more energy. These are all behaviors that people are looking and hoping to change. And so when we look to models like we do in psychology, we have to understand where all of this behavior comes from. And so many of you are very familiar with emotional intelligence. That concept, groundbreaking, again, one of my favorite books, Daniel Goleman, Emotional Intelligence. 20 years ago, I started teaching leaders, assessing leaders on their emotional intelligence competencies, because at the time, the research said it had an 85% impact on a person's success in life and leadership. And now in the last, 5 years or so, we've had even more advances in neuroscience, neurophysiology that actually points to the origin of all of our feelings, all of our actions, our habits, our choices, and our behaviors, which actually is our thinking. And this is what positive intelligence is based on. So in order to have real lasting change, I started working with my clients and with organizations and with leadership teams in this area of positive intelligence. And it's not a standalone. We still need all three of these concepts in order for us to be able to thrive. We need to learn how to master our mindsets, which is what positive intelligence teaches us to do. We need to learn how to be able to self-manage and master our emotions, which is what emotional intelligence teaches us to do. And then we need to learn how to master our day-to-day habits, our actions, and our behaviors, which is what atomic habits teaches us to do. So this is how we arrived at this three-part series. And I just wanted to give you that context and that understanding that each of these sessions will build off of each other. And the end result is that you will leave with more tools in your toolkit and hopefully being able to make some more lasting change. And again, I can tell you the amount of clients who I've had come to me over the years, like, Debbie, we still need help managing stress. And I'm saying to them, you don't need more time management tools or tips. What you need is to learn how to master your emotions. What you need is to learn how to recognize the mindsets that are actually creating all the chemistry that's flooding your bloodstream, creating your emotional feelings in the first place. And so this is where we're starting today. Positive intelligence has an acronym, so you're going to hear me refer to it as PQ. So positive intelligence equals PQ. Just like emotional intelligence is EQ, intellectual intelligence is IQ. All right, so I'm going to use those terms interchangeably. And what positive intelligence does is measure how your mindset and your thinking creates the feelings that you have and contributes to your actions, choices, and behaviors. Positive intelligence is all about learning to recognize your thinking, learning to recognize your negative mindsets, learning to recognize your limiting beliefs, learning to recognize your distorted thought patterns, so that you can choose intentionally to think thoughts that are going to benefit you in more positive ways. So a lot of the science and research behind positive intelligence is based on things like mindfulness, meditation, and self-awareness. I'm going to take you through a 3-step process that's going to help you learn how to develop greater positive intelligence. And again, just so you know, I mean, this is based on extensive research. I encourage everyone who's on here today, this is like a little taster. I mentioned at the beginning, I took a 6-week program on this. We're here for less than an hour. So I am literally introducing you at a high level to these concepts. If you want to dive deeper, if you want to learn more, if you want to grow further, you can reach out to me. I do training for organizations on all of these concepts. And I also do a lot of one-on-one coaching for folks. So we're not going to leave you hanging at the end of today. There is going to be further help and support if you're interested. Now, what are the benefits to you and I learning or developing our positive intelligence? Lots of research shows that the more positive your mindsets are, the higher salary, the higher income you will achieve. 37% increase in sales. This was based on some research at a number of organizations, specifically with their sales teams. Research also shows that positivity improves things like immune functioning, lengthens our lifespan, absolutely is linked to resiliency and mental health and well-being, and also can help increase your performance. So there's a lot of benefits to you and I in growing these muscles and learning these skills. I want you just to pause for a moment and ask yourself if you could change one thing as a result of today's webinar for yourself, for your life, what would it be? And just take a moment and draw that to your attention. I do also want to encourage you today to ask questions. And so at any time, if you have a question, please feel free to put it in the chat. And I'll also pause as we go through each of the 3 parts of today and also allow room for questions. So you don't need to save your questions to the end. So now that you have a better understanding of what positive intelligence is all about, how do we actually grow in this area? And so there is a 3-step process that is taught in order to help you develop your PQ muscles. The first step in this process is that you and I need to create some self-awareness around the mindsets with which we view our world and our circumstances. And we all have a number of mindsets, but there are typically a couple of mindsets that are more dominant for each of us. And mindsets are established early in life. They're established from our environment. They're established from messages that we heard and learned from people in our lives. And the nice thing about positive intelligence is I'm going to share with you the website where all of this information is. And they provide you with an opportunity to actually take a free assessment. They are so committed to wanting to help change the world that they actually have made their assessments free. This is another reason why I love this tool at any time. And so action number 1 from today's session. After today's session, I'm going to encourage you to log in online, and I'm going to encourage you to take 2 free assessments at positiveintelligence.com. We will have that information up there for you. And those free assessments right away will help you identify the mindsets with which you view your world, your circumstances most of the time. Once you become aware of those things, you then develop what we call in learning conscious incompetence. So initially there's a lack of awareness. Then we take assessments, and now we're in this place of conscious incompetence. We're aware of mindsets that might be limiting us and creating negative feelings and outcomes for us, but we don't then know what to do about it, right? So assessing ourselves isn't enough to change, but it is the first step in change. So the second part of developing your positive intelligence is learning to spot those mindsets in your thinking as they happen. And this is why we're going to spend some time today talking about how we can stay in a place of calm. And I'm going to talk to you a bit about the brain and how it works. And when the brain is under stress, it's very hard for us to be able to spot our negative mindsets. So part of us learning to grow in our PQ muscles is actively and daily doing exercises that can help us calm the parts of our brain that get activated under stress. So that's step 2. The third step in this process is then intentionally doing exercises in our day, in our week, to help us use the parts of our brain that are associated with positivity. And we know from brain science and neuroscience that positive thinking originates in a different part of the brain. And so there are activities and exercises that you and I can do daily to actually help strengthen those neural pathways so that we start to access and use them more. So I just want to pause for a moment and ask, does anyone have questions on the 3-step process? Most of the people that I coach don't follow a 3-step process, and this is why they're not able to get traction or make positive changes. You know, they might identify their negative mindsets, but then not know how to fix it or change it. Or they work really hard to think positively and reframe and do positive affirmations, and they don't know why it's not sticking for them, right? And it's critical that you understand that all 3 of these things need to happen daily in order for those positive regions of the brain to strengthen and grow. So any questions? And if there are no questions, that's good, because that means I'm explaining this in ways that are easy for you to understand. I know this topic can be a little bit heady, which is why I'm also encouraging you to get the book, to look at some YouTube videos after today's session. But let's start then with step 1, which
There's just one comment. Sorry, Debbie, one comment from LinkedIn. No questions in the chat, but Dawn, thank you for your comment. She said, definitely regretting mistakes from the past. They're learning opportunities.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, we are going to talk about growing in what you're mentioning here, which is our growth mindset. So we're going to talk about positive mindsets, but before we get there, we need to first create self-awareness around the lenses that you and I view our situations, our circumstances, and our world. And as I said, we all have mindsets that are filters. And those mindsets are created early in childhood, but we can change them now as adults, because as adults, we get to introduce this concept of choice. And so the first step in developing your positive intelligence is to get to know these negative mindsets. You may have heard them before called limiting beliefs. You may have heard them before called distorted thought patterns. The positive intelligence community calls these mindset saboteurs. So they all have just a slightly different take on the name, but they point to the same things, which is that we all have filters. And I like to look at it like a pair of glasses. I've got glasses for when I'm looking at a laptop. I've got readers for when I'm reading. And other people have glasses for distance. We all view situations through a filter. And there are 10 typically that people have. When you go to positiveintelligence.com, which is your action step in order to help you grow in your awareness, you will receive a report from them. This is all free. And in the report, you will right away see the 2 or 3 mindsets that are dominant for you. So we all have a couple of mindsets that are dominant, and it's important for us that we get to know what those mindsets sound like. The goal for us is to be able to recognize that in our own thinking. The assessment is how you're going to do this. Now, I can make other suggestions for you, like maybe start journaling after today and then write down your thoughts about a situation, come back to it later, read what you've written down, see if you can recognize any of these mindsets in what you've written. Listen to yourself when you have conversations with people. See if you can hear the mindsets in your thinking. These are all going to be strategies that are going to help you grow in your self-awareness around these mindsets. Why is self-awareness so important? Because the second step is then learning how to manage them. You and I can't manage what we're not aware of first. So step 1, identify negative mindsets. And even as I'm sitting here talking to you about this, and you're looking at the names of these mindsets, my sense is that already you're able to start to see or spot the ones that are true for you. So I would just love to pause and say, if you look at this list, can you right away identify with any of these mindsets? Just type a yes or a Y in the chat. If right away you're like, I already have self-awareness that the controller is very dominant in my thinking. How many of you can identify right away with, I already have awareness that the pleaser dominates a lot of my thinking? So I think, this is more intuitive than we give it credit for, but the great thing about it is that you can take an assessment to be armed with really more factual information. The thing I love about the report is that it doesn't just leave you with, here are your top 3 mindsets. It actually gives you detailed information about each of the mindsets, about why you developed that mindset, about how, as a child, this mindset, its entire purpose was to protect you and keep you safe and keep you happy and keep you healthy. But as an adult now, the great news is, these mindsets no longer serve us. We are now adults. We are stronger. We are more capable. We are armed with more tools. We are armed with more resources. We are armed with more support. We are armed with more information. And so with that comes this idea of choice. We can still hear that automatic thought that comes to us. We can recognize it for what it is. And then we actually can introduce this concept of choice to say, that thought process is no longer serving me. It's no longer for my best good. It's no longer feeding my joy or my peace or my happiness or my success. So I can introduce a new way of thinking. And in positive intelligence, we call this the self-command muscle. We all have the ability to rein in our negative mindsets, but we can't do that if we're not aware of them first. So here's a quick example, and I just want you to use this as a moment of self-reflection. And if you have a pen and paper, great. If not, just become aware of your thinking. So you're in the middle of an important project, and mistakes and failures are happening all around you. What are your thoughts? And if you have a pen and paper, just take a moment and write down the first couple of thoughts that pop into your mind. Now that you're aware of the thoughts, how do those thoughts make you feel? What are the feelings then that come up for you? And I'd love each of you, if you could, just to take a moment. You don't need to share your thoughts because that's going to take time. But could you just pop one word into the chat? What are the feelings that come up for you because of the thoughts that you have? So we have a positive feeling already, which is empowered. And thank you so much for that, because my guess is that the thought that you had was a thought that was empowering. Yeah, and lots of folks are messaging in here saying stress, frustration, overwhelm, fear, worry, helplessness. Okay, so this, you're starting to see how this works. The next question I want to ask you then is, what do you do as a result of this? And so you need to know that this process happens in our brains automatically in an instant. Most of us are going through our lives at such a fast, busy pace, we're not even aware. So if you pause for a moment now, when you're feeling these things, what do you do? And as you do those actions, what are the outcomes that you will experience? And so what I want you to do now is just a quick exercise. Go back to the thoughts that you wrote down or the thoughts that came up in your mind, and simply look at this list and see if you can spot any of these negative mindsets in the things that you were thinking. And if you do, could you just type it into the chat for us? So as you look back on your thoughts, as you reflect on what you wrote, can you see or hear any of these mindsets in your thinking? Excellent. So already you are growing in your positive intelligence. And so as a practical takeaway, when I'm coaching people one-on-one, we start with this first step of the process. And I'm going to encourage all of you to even just start today doing this for yourself. Anytime you start to feel a feeling like stress, worry, anxiety, when you can find a quiet moment or make a quiet moment, get out a piece of paper and write down all the thoughts that are coming into your mind about that. So we call that thought dumping. And I encourage my clients to even begin a practice daily, 5 minutes at the end of the day. Just do a scan back over your day. Were there times when you experienced negative feelings? What were your thoughts that created those feelings? And we're going to help in our second part of this series to grow an emotional intelligence, because the truth is I've got a lot of clients who actually aren't aware of their feelings as they happen. So it can be hard for you to do this. And this is why I'm encouraging you to start first with this concept of thought dumping. A situation happens, maybe the outcome is not as you hoped it would be. Maybe you definitely feel tension and stress in your body, or you are aware of worry and anxiety in your thinking. Pause when you can, pen to paper, write down all you're thinking about the situation, pull out your list of these mindsets and see if you can start to spot them. That's the first step to being able to self-manage and change, is awareness. Any questions on step 1? So I just want to pause. This is powerful for teams, right? And as you grow in your ability to hear and see your own negative mindsets, you actually will become a better leader and coach for your people, because in your conversations with others, you will then also be able to hear their negative mindsets, which then will help you to be able to invite them to reframe their thinking. So growing in awareness first is the critical first step. So are there any questions on this?
Hi, Debbie. Nothing on the chat at the moment. However, some really fantastic comments rolling in, both here as well as LinkedIn. There was one question that came kind of right at the end of that first segment, and I don't want to miss it. So let me know. I mean, I'll say it now. If you want to address it at the end, we could do that. And it came from Matthias. Matthias, I hope I pronounced your name right, but Is there additional thought into how to develop the positive paths in ADHD individuals who have issues with positive/reward biochemical interactions?
Yeah, that's a really great question.
Yeah.
So again, I think these concepts can be applied to everyone. And I know that with neurodiversity, it definitely becomes harder. So what I am going to say is to really work on this next step in order to help, right? So I know that when the brain is under stress, then for sure, things like ADHD symptoms become heightened. Okay. And so this is where I'm going to encourage you to really work hard on step 2, which is calming the stress parts of our brain. And so again, through neuroscience and research, we absolutely now can identify the regions and areas of our brain that are activated, right? That create that stress response for us. And this is the limbic system and specifically our amygdala. And we can see, right? We can see on brain scans that when that part of our brain, which is really our primitive survival parts of our brain, are activated, the thinking that follows from there is what? Scattered, distracted, negative, worrying, stressful, because it's all about survival. And so we, again, know through neuroscience that if we intentionally work on calming those areas of our brain, it will free up energy so that the other areas of our brain that are associated with things like focus, attention, memory, learning, empathy, creativity can be more activated. So managing the stress response is huge. When a brain, right, this is fight or flight. When our brain detects stress, it's like a smoke alarm that goes off. And this then activates, right, that stress response, the neurochemical response in our nervous systems and in our bodies and in our bloodstreams. So, I mean, I'm going to get to this in a moment, and it's a great question. We absolutely need to be working daily to decrease our stress response, our cortisol. And I am also going to say that folks who have experienced trauma absolutely will struggle with this more, right, than people who don't. Because when we experience trauma, it literally alters some of our brain functioning in these areas. I've experienced trauma myself. I've done a lot of work to help manage, my stress response. There's been a lot of groundbreaking work now. I'm so grateful for things like EMDR therapy. I can think of things like EFT tapping, right? I can also think of things like somatic experiencing that are all newer, right? Newer concepts that help teach our brains and our bodies how to calm down that activation, that stress response, and return to a place of safety. And as soon as that happens, the other regions of our brain, right, that are responsible, mostly the prefrontal cortex, for problem solving, for decision making, actually get activated. And this is why, the brain body, the mind body connection is huge. It's completely integrated. And I have to say, this is why I was so insistent on teaching, my clients and my leaders and in my coaching about these concepts, because so many people were coming to me stuck at the feeling level, myself included. And I was like, there has to be more to this. So step 2, right? It's not enough to just identify our negative mindsets. Step 2 is, what are you doing day to day to help calm your cortisol levels and your nervous system and your amygdala and your limbic system? And the great thing is that we know from neuroscience that there are absolutely activities that you and I can do that will give you that result. So let's do a quick check-in here. What activities do you do in your day to calm your limbic system, your amygdala, and your nervous system? So I'd like each of you to think of one calming activity that you do in your day. So right away, I'm going to tell you, I'm teaching all of my clients meditation. So I teach webinars for companies and leaders called Mindful Leadership. It's all about meditation. And again, you know, we could do an entire series on meditation, but the research to back it up, meditation increases regions and areas in the brain that are responsible, right, for calming, and decreases this limbic system and amygdala hijacking. So if you haven't started meditating, that is like your second action step after today is, and you can do this quickly and easily. I mean, the amount of apps that are available today that you could download, some are free, and you can literally click and close your eyes and do a 5-minute guided meditation. And you will be empowered to know that while you're doing that, it's having a calming effect on the regions of the brain that are actually connected with stressful, anxious, negative thinking. 5 minutes a day is all it takes. And of course, you know, lots of people work their way up to like half an hour a day, but I'm telling you, you will see positive results to your self-regulation in 5 minutes a day. What are some of your other brain calming activities? Breathing, that is one of my favorites. I saw someone who had a PhD in self-regulation. There was a time where I was getting some counseling and coaching myself with issues of anxiety and stress. And I saw someone who had a PhD in self-regulation. And I'm going to tell you, I paid a lot of money for someone to teach me how to breathe better. Your breath is completely connected, right? The brain gets oxygen in, fuels the cells, fuels the organs, fuels the body. A lot of us, when we are on email, on our phones, concentrating, hold in our breath and aren't even aware of it. And the minute you do that, it sends a signal to your brain that you're under threat and you're under attack. And then these chemicals get dumped into your bloodstream. That creates a stress response. So many of my clients are like, why is my stress response so much more activated? Why am I so much more reactive? And I ask questions like, have you paid attention to your breathing? How do you breathe when you're driving? How do you breathe when you're on the phone? How do you breathe when you're in a meeting? How do you breathe when you're checking email? How do you breathe when you're on social media? Notice if you're shallow breathing or if you're withholding your breathing. Okay, lots of other good ideas in here. What I am going to say to you is that a lot of folks, myself included, did not learn positive ways of calming their brain when it was activated or under stress. And so we picked up negative habits along the way, right? So habits like consuming alcohol, what's the purpose? It's temporary numbing. It's temporary calming. And there is so much research out there now that tells us, right, that alcohol actually increases stress response, increases anxiety, and decreases sleep quality. So it's one of our absolute worst strategies to go to. Exercise is also a great calming activity. And the last one I'm going to mention here is this idea of resetting your vagus nerve. How many of you have heard of that before? And I'm going to actually type it into the chat, vagus nerve. There's a lot of exercises that you can Google, that you can see on Instagram. I love it. And I do vagus nerve resets a couple of times in my day, and it completely calms down my system and switches me back into the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the calmer system. So up here, I have some ideas for you. Box breathing is powerful, where you breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, breathe out for 4, hold it for 4, and even just repeat 5 or 10 times. I'm going to encourage you to start doing some of these things throughout your day. I've got clients who set reminders for themselves in the phone, who put it on sticky notes, who stick it on their bathroom mirror. When we do atomic habits, you'll hear me say, attach a new habit to an already existing habit for it to stick. So sitting at a red light, standing in a lineup at the grocery store, just start breathing and regulating your nervous system more often in your day. The other thing I'm going to encourage you to do that has a very powerful calming impact on the limbic system is something called grounding. So I'm curious how many of you do grounding throughout your day. And grounding is simply pausing. Maybe you're going to close your eyes and just spend a minute or two focusing on one of your 5 senses. So simply, it could be you're sitting in a meeting, there's all this stuff going on around you, and you find a focal point, maybe it's a picture on the wall, and you really just focus and concentrate on that one thing as much as you can for a period of time, 2 minutes. And what that does is start to calm down all the overstimulation that's going on in your brain, that's activating your stress response and your nervous system. One of my favorites is just even after Zoom meetings, close my eyes for 2 or 3 minutes and just zero in on what I can hear. Or close your eyes and just focus in on your breathing and what you can feel. So again, grounding is something you can do throughout your day. And again, all based on research. Just want to pause for a moment. Any questions on this idea of calming the parts of our brain that get activated? And there's lots of other strategies. EFT tapping is another one of my favorites. Again, we could do a whole webinar just on that.
Debbie, there was a question, not quite related to this, but certainly right on the topic around stress and some of the factors and how to deal with it. And again, it came from LinkedIn, from Avinash, and he says the following: stress is often symptomatic of other factors. To deal sustainably with stress, is it not important to understand the underlying drivers and address them first? Meditation, he goes on to say, meditation may provide temporary and symptomatic relief, but may not address the root cause.
Yeah, absolutely. And so again, what I want to encourage though is to do the assessment of the mindsets, because lots of research today is saying that stress originates in our thinking. So what is the thinking that's creating the stress response for you? And you're absolutely right. It's not just about thinking. It's also about identifying what are those stressors and doing some problem solving around that. A lot of people that I coach, and again, myself included, right? When our stress response is activated, it's very hard for us to do our thinking here in the prefrontal cortex. And our thinking brain, this executive functioning part of our brain, is responsible for things like problem solving and decision making. And this is why you'll hear me say, like, one of the brain pathways that we really want to work on growing and developing, or muscles, you can call it a muscle in your brain, is this idea of flexible thinking. And so what I've put up here are simply 4. And again, reading the book on positive intelligence and trying to cover all of this in an hour, not so realistic. So I've chosen kind of 4 different things that you can try to do in your day, in your week, when you're feeling stressed, when you're feeling activated, when you're feeling depressed, when you're feeling anxious. And these are all conscious activities that you and I need to do, which when we do these activities, again, if we had our brains hooked up to electrodes, we would see the brainwave activity lighting up in the regions of the brain that are associated with positive thinking. So, I mean, many of you have heard of this concept of brain gym, right? This is what it's about. The brain is a muscle. New neural pathways develop every day. And our choice is whether we continue to feed, right, the old neural pathways that are leading to things like stress, worry, anxiety, sadness, powerlessness, helplessness, or we're intentionally doing brain gym or cognitive exercises that strengthen the regions of the brain that are associated with peace, with joy, with creativity, with flexibility, with problem solving, with decision making. It's very hard for our brain to be stressed and all of those other good things at the same time. So what we want to do is calm the stress response so that we can activate more easily and readily those positive areas of the brain. So what are the exercises? And again, just introducing you to these concepts, and some may be new and some may not be new. When I teach coaching for resiliency in companies, I'm teaching leaders how to help employees be more resilient. And so we know that one of the things that's really important for resiliency is the ability to be flexible in our thinking, the ability to try on different mindsets. Most of our mindsets, right, are limited. A lot of the times we make assumptions, and these limiting beliefs and assumptions keep us stuck. Back in the day, I remember, who here remembers Edward de Bono and his 6 thinking hats? This was one of the favorite activities that I used to use in leadership training around creativity. Is I literally assigned a color of a hat to each person in the room, right? The white hat, I don't know, was peace. The black hat was negative and critical. The green hat was innovative. And we would put an issue or problem up on the board. And I would say to each person in the room, you have to come up with thoughts related to the hat that you're wearing. And the purpose of that exercise, right, was to help people's mindsets grow from fixed to flexible. Now, think about the world we live in today. Change is happening at a rate and pace like never before. And really what people are struggling with is to keep up with that. Why? Because a lot of people's mindsets are quite fixed. So we can teach people to be more resilient and flexible in their thinking. And this is why I love this concept of growth mindset, is that it actually helps people learn, right? That, okay, you can have a thought like, this is really hard. And you can become aware of that. And you can try on a different thought, which is, but I can try my best. And if I can't do it, I can ask for help. Right? You can have a thought like, I can't do this. And you can become aware of it and reframe it to say, this is an opportunity for me to learn something new. You can have a thought like, there is no way that this will ever work. Right? So I hope you're hearing that these first thoughts that many of us have are very limited, right? They're very fixed. They're not flexible. They're rigid. And as we learn to see things differently, choose different thoughts, different perceptions, we create more flexibility in our thinking, which opens us up, right, to possibilities, to different feelings, and to different outcomes. So I just want to take a moment and allow you a chance to try it. And I have to be honest and say to you, I've got clients who really struggle to do this. One of my favorite examples, and I'm just adding a bit of humor into today's session, was I had a client who was really in distress about an argument that they had with a family member, and it was before Christmas. And so I was saying, they were speaking to me about all their feelings about the situation and all their thoughts about the situation. And as they were speaking to me, I was writing down, right, everything they were saying. And there was a lot of these fixed mindsets, limiting beliefs, negative mindsets in their thinking, which of course was adding to all these feelings. So when we got to the place of reframe, right, coaching for resiliency, is there any positive thought that you could possibly think about this situation. And they came up blank. And I took a deep breath. I thought, well, I'm going to go out on a limb here. And I said, well, I guess it's like one less person to invite to dinner. And of course, they burst out laughing. And it was a bit of a tongue-in-cheek moment. I'm not making light of a sad or difficult situation. But what the purpose of it is to say, in every circumstance, we have a number of options with how we view that situation. And we can choose a different way of thinking. And when we do, our feelings change and our choices change and our actions change and our outcomes change. So again, growth mindset, introducing flexible thinking. Any questions on this? Introducing choice, right? Growing in flexibility.
No questions at the moment, either on LinkedIn or here. Lots of great comments, though. I think we've seen well over 30 at the moment. So time's flying by. I can't believe we're almost at the top of the hour, but thanks, Debbie.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, and I will get through the next couple ones. The other one that I really encourage all of us to learn and grow in is this idea of self-compassion or compassion for others. So I'm doing a lot of teaching in workplaces today about empathy and leadership, about how, leadership today is all about relationships. It's no longer about authority. It's about influence. How do we influence others? We influence others by having good relationships with them. This is all about attachment theory in psychology. How do we influence others? We influence others by creating trust and respect with them. One of the key things that creates good relationships, not only with others, but with ourselves, is compassion and empathy. Empathy is kind of the outward expression of self-compassion. And I'm just going to tell you that I coach a lot of folks who are feeling stressed and burnt out. And when I hear the way that they speak to themselves, the way that they speak about themselves, I hear a lot of judgment. I hear a lot of criticism. I hear a lot of the stickler. And that way of thinking is really adding to people's feelings of distress and like unworthiness and not able to handle or manage. And so I encourage everyone who wants to grow in positivity to grow in self-compassion. Self-compassion actually helps people grow in self-confidence. And notice the key word in both of those things is self. So many folks that I coach are looking for compassion from others or confidence from others. And yet the word implies self. It's very hard for us to give away to others what we don't have ourselves first. So how do we grow in this self-command muscle called compassion? Number one, again, recognize those harsh, critical, negative, judgmental thoughts that you have towards yourself. And when you have those thoughts, right, calm yourself down, do some breathing, do a grounding exercise. In the book, Positive Intelligence, they call that a PQ rep, and then replace it with a thought that's more kind, that's more true, that has more perspective, that's more balanced, even more loving. So I often say to my clients, if this was your 5-year-old child, how would you speak to them about this situation? Any questions on growing in compassion? Yeah, this is huge for the science of well-being. Another muscle that I want to encourage all of us to grow in is gratitude. And I can't, again, cite enough about research in this area. We know it improves our physical health, our sleep, our psychological health, our empathy. our mental strength and stamina and grit, our self-esteem. Why would we not want more of this? And gratitude happens in a positive region of the brain. And so as we intentionally start paying attention to and noticing the good things, right? And the things that we are grateful for, we actually start to have positive chemicals dumped into our bloodstream, like serotonin and dopamine. I've read some great books over the years. Has anyone read any great books on gratitude, right? Attitude of Gratitude, The Happiness Project. I mean, there's so many great books that speak about how when we intentionally pay attention and practice gratitude, we can't help but feel less stressed. We can't help but think more positively about people and circumstances. And there's a ton of research again about this. One of the studies I read, this is years ago, I was teaching about this, and it was simply to say, this is about positive reinforcement theory, right? And so again, we know in the busyness of our lives, and I hear this often from my clients, I do employee engagement surveys, and I ask all kinds of questions about things like psychological health and well-being in the workplace with my clients. And I hear a lot of comments from employees like, I never hear from my manager unless there's a problem. I never hear from my supervisor unless there's a criticism. Everybody today is so busy. And I can't but help think that if we could just intentionally put a little more time and effort into gratefulness and appreciation, people would be much more engaged and motivated, right? The war on talent is fierce. It's getting harder and harder today to find and keep great people. I think people are starving for attention, for appreciation, and for gratitude. The last thing, and I'm just mindful of our time, and please feel free to put any questions that you have remaining, is just this idea of how do we continue to be creative, stay open and curious. I want to introduce you to the third book that I'm going to mention, and we'll make sure that you get this. It's called Creativity Unlimited by Michael Dalen. I don't know if you've heard of him. I teach workshops on creativity and innovation for my clients. And I'm going to tell you, pattern breaking exercises are great things to do that help activate the creative areas of our brain and our right brain thinking. Many of you have probably heard of the tool called Yes and, right? So we know that people are at least 10% right. So it's like, here's what I like about your idea, and here's something that can build off your idea. Also, to stay open and curious by constantly asking ourselves and our teams questions like, what's something we haven't tried? Or is there someone outside of this that we could ask for input? Where else could we look for answers? So this is about developing those regions of the brain that help get us out of the box, right? That help us to be more creative in our problem solving. And in the book, Creativity Unlimited, there's a number of pattern breaking exercises that you can do with your teams. My favorite one is quiet brainstorming. So I love this. Instead of putting an idea or an issue out there and saying, what solutions do people have? Just hand out sticky notes and say to your team, I'm going to give everyone 5 minutes. We're going to be quiet. And I want you all to write down all your ideas and suggestions on these sticky notes. And when you're done, give them to me. And then I'm going to post them all up here. And we're going to see what kind of creativity can be unleashed from that. So that's just a little snapshot of some of the cool pattern breaking exercises that you can learn. And again, what this does is generate positive regions of the brain, increases functioning there, increases activation there, which then helps you to be able to access those areas of your brain more easily, more frequently. So we are at the end of our session today, and I want to encourage you with this takeaway. As you heard these concepts, what can you take forward with you, right? That will help create more positivity for yourself, or more positivity for your team. just put a little bit of actions up here for you to consider. And I just want to thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for your great input, comments, questions. And I hope you found today was a useful session for you, and that you'll be able to make some positive changes as a result.
Debbie, thank you so much. It was a jam-packed hour. I think we all learned a lot. We had our participants, so thank you for joining us, but everyone stayed till the very, very end between here and our social media channels. We've had just so many comments, so many positive comments and engagement. It was one of the best webinars we've seen. So thank you again. I feel like I was screenshotting some of these all throughout. I couldn't write fast enough. Thank you. And of course, for everyone joining us today, if you're still on, please know again, this is a 3-part series. Our next one will be on emotional intelligence, and then part 3 on atomic habits. So please don't miss them. Our webinars are every 2 weeks. Of course, our Tech Canada website will have this recording. We always do our very best to turn it around as quickly as possible. I know there are some questions around catching it. So if you've missed it today, or you want to go back to it or share it with your team, more importantly, or your partner or your family at home, anyone that can benefit from Debbie's insights and expertise, really, please do make sure to tune into our website again at www.tech-canada.com. And again, Debbie, thank you. I know we're a couple minutes over, but everyone's still sticking around. So clearly they've gotten just so much out of this. Thank you again, and everyone have a wonderful day, and we'll see you on part 2.
Thank you
so much. Debbie, have a wonderful day.
Have a wonderful day, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye.